a lot of the.
It's okay. I just started it, so I won't forget in 3 minutes because I forgot.
Okay. I better stop.
Okay. Oh, no, you're fine.
She's got it downstairs, so I'm gonna share. Nope, I'm not gonna share. I'm going to slideshow. That's what I meant to click on. iPhone 107. No. Okay, she's got it.
So will I just click through, or are you gonna, you will just wanna click for me?
I can
That's great.
for that.
Yes, that's great.
Just say
Click, we'll wait. Is that clock in the corner accurate? Man, love that clock. The
Yeah.
worst thing is when you go somewhere to do something like this and you're at the front of the room and you realize, because I get into it
Yeah.
and then it's like, oh, have I been talking for 10 minutes or for an hour?
Yeah. Well,
Are all
and then
these people wanting to go and I'm just getting started?
yeah, our education committee last year asked for that because they said when an instructor goes like this, it kills the rest of the momentum that you had going. So for them to be able to track their time without anybody realizing they were doing that.
That's very smart.
Wonderful. Yeah, it really is wonderful. Because you know what you have to get through.
Mhm.
And so do you want to stop and have questions, or do you just need to
Keep going.
keep push?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we had a non-digital clock, one of the pretty ones, and then they were like, yeah, no, we're still having to figure out what, like, read the time. Well, in their defense, it was like in Roman numerals and not,
it was
very
really pretty.
very, very pretty.
Yeah, it's interesting out there.
Starts at 1,
Right now, I'm getting a lot of
Two.
people saying, well, you may hear about this.
it's in person too.
All right. I'll be ready. Say something, but at least we start.
Start muted.
Oh, yeah, a lot of times, well, people are just doing other things, or you can hear them say, hey, I'll have a Whopper. with-" It's like, okay,
Yeah.
the old Whopper with cheese order is going on.
Yes. Were you at night camp?
Yes,
Were you in the leadership part?
part of the time.
I love when Mark King was like, I'm gonna go to the bathroom. Please mute my mic. It's like,
I
ah.
mean, I think all of that happens.
Oh, yeah, it does.
You know, people just completely forget what's going on and they're just living their personal life. I know my husband has sometimes walked. Wow. How much longer are you gonna be in just that attitude? Okay, that's my husband. He's ready for me to be done. But I'm not done, and I apologize for his bad attitude. Because you can just hear it. How much longer are you gonna be? I'm like, oh,
Okay.
way to chime in there, honey. It is pretty funny. All right. I think it is after 1 o'clock. So we're gonna start our broker chat. Thanks for a few people being in the room. It's so much easier. We are going to talk today about inspections, repairs, and amendments, because I feel like we're back in that world, right? We were in crazy seller world where the seller just said, no, I'm not gonna do anything. And now we've switched right back into, oh, okay, the buyer may want some repairs done, may need some repairs done. So that's why I thought this was a good topic to bring back, to remind us all how to do it and do it, in my opinion, right. You know, to do it as strong as possible that we can. And so, okay, you can click. Sorry. There we go. All right. So we're going to kind of start with, what does the contract actually say about repairs. So let's assume we're gonna go through the amendment process, but let's start by let's assume we agreed on repairs and we get there and the buyer doesn't like the repairs, or the seller hasn't finished the repairs, whatever. So I wanted to be clear right at the beginning that if you agree to repairs in an amendment, that is part of the contract now. And the seller is in default if they do not complete the repairs, and the assumption is in an acceptable fashion. So if they do them and they do a really crappy job and they think they're still done, they're not done, right? That there is a standard of care assumed in a real estate contract. So that surprises some people. So before we talk about what you're going to ask for and how you're going to ask, let's just understand that legally there is a standard of care. We're not going to go in there and you're going to have hammered some crappy thing up on the wall instead of replaced the wood trim. That's not going to work, right? Just hammering up a board. That's not going to be considered by any court to be having done the repair. So interesting just to know that in any contract, actually in the state of Texas, good faith is assumed. Don't enter into the contract unless you expect to perform with good faith. So if you intend to screw somebody, don't sign the contract. Don't agree. If you sit at your kitchen table and you say, well, we could just do this repair just a little bit, just don't sign it, right? Good faith is assumed. So I thought that would be a good place for us to start. Okay. All right. So let's talk about the third-party financing addendum also, because when apparently it's on my mind when I'm putting these slides together that sellers don't always want to do repairs, right? They're still living back in the land of I don't have to do anything. I could just whatever the buyer wants. We all need to understand that if there is financing, there is also the lender must approve the property. So if the property needs a roof, I have seen them go back to the inspection and decline to make a loan because there was cracked grout in the master shower. So the seller thinks they're negotiating repairs, and really the seller has, honestly, if the buyer wants out, the buyer's got a really huge out. So what paragraph 2B says, so everybody wants it to be about those number of days that you put for the buyer. That's not what this conversation is about. That number of days is approving the buyer, their credit worthiness, their debt to income ratio, their child support payments, their credit card debt. It's about them. Paragraph 2B is about the house. It is about, does the house appraise? Yes. It's also about, can the house get homeowners insurance? So if it needs a new roof or it needs a roof repair, the answer to that is no, it can't. It also can't get homeowners insurance if it needs big electrical repairs or big plumbing repairs. They'll refuse to insure it. And what happens too often is we go through closing and then State Farm does their drive-by and says, oh, that roof, no, we're not going to insure that roof. And now you have a buyer with no homeowners insurance. So you really need to be careful about the condition of the home, because this isn't out for the buyer up to 3 days before closing. 3 days before closing. Buyer, not later than 3 days before the closing date, may terminate this contract by giving seller notice of termination and a copy of a written statement from the lender setting forth the reasons. 3 days before closing. Buyers, sellers hate that. It's a huge hole for sellers, right? So it's the most misunderstood paragraph in the whole dealy wheel. People don't understand it. The lender absolutely gets to decide at the very last minute if they want to make that loan against that home or not. They have the number of days to decide if they want to make a loan to that person, but they have right up to 3 days before closing if they want to make a loan on that particular property. And they can say no for any reason they want to. Well, that's not a legit reason. Well, who exactly do you think is governing that? Say nobody.
Is there something you can do to make sure that they approve the home earlier in the contract?
Basically, no. I mean, in the end, what you have to have is you have to have a willing buyer and a willing seller. And if you don't end up with a willing buyer and a willing seller, please do not misunderstand. They can always fail, pretty much always. Now, we can have a great argument about earnest money, and I'm always up for a good fight, but I mean, truth is, if a buyer doesn't want to buy a home, there's no judge. We're not going to go sit in front of any judge who's going to go, you have to. So I mean, they just don't do that. You know, what's wrong with you? Sell out somebody else. Keep going.
To help our buyers or sellers, where can we get some guidelines on what is the lender requirements for FHA or?
So I'm going to show you a screen about FHA because FHA is a special circumstance.
Yeah.
But lenders, if they just want to help that buyer, they can decline it for any reason. We had one declined recently for overhead power lines that have been there every second. And so we're still fighting that. And I think we're going to win because I'm just going to win out of sheer grit. Not really because we necessarily have the right, because it says pretty clearly here they can decline the loan up to 3 days before closing, but I'm just going to hassle them every single day. Every day. First thing I do in the morning right now. Ding ding, it's me. Are you releasing our earnest money today, or shall I send another demand ugly letter? Now I know, now I've got like 3 business addresses. I am all up in your stuff. Let it go. And we're gonna get it. Because they don't really want to go wherever, it's not worth it. But a list of things that they can decline the loan for doesn't exist.
Okay.
I'm going to show you FHA what is required.
Okay.
Okay. Oh, lots of words. Okay. So before closing, if seller has not adequately completed the repairs, so you go and you've gotten the receipts, but you go and they're missing one thing. They didn't do one thing, or they can't get parts. Today, that's like a legitimate problem. Well, I couldn't get the part. So now what do we do? So this is what can happen, right? If it's contentious between the parties, always tell everybody in writing that you're not an attorney, and if they want more help, they should go to an attorney, right? We're not attorneys. I'm not either. None of us are. So if it feels tense, you know what that feels like. That's the time to say, by the way, just a reminder, I'm not an attorney and you should knock yourself out talking to an attorney. Run, run, run. If we're trying to solve it and the seller has not completed the repairs, here are your choices. Postpone and extend the closing, right? The contract has 5 days that both parties have already agreed to allow the seller to complete the repairs. So you can extend by 5 days, and that should not be a disagreement. They've already agreed to it in the contract. It's in there, okay? It also may be a negotiation, right? The buyer may be incurring storage expenses or hotel expense. I mean, you may have to negotiate that. It's really in the seller's best interest to be done, but sometimes things happen. 2, another option is to have the seller pay in advance. So if they can't get the part for the dishwasher, they just can't get it. They can pay the dishwashing guy, the appliance repairman, in advance and provide a receipt. The buyer can call that guy, verify, yes, I'm going to come up and pay. As long as the buyer accepts it, they can all proceed to closing. Important thing to know. Once closing is over, the seller is under no obligation to do anything. Closing terminates the contract. So one of the first things that happened to me when I became broker for so many people is we had a $5,000 credit from seller to buyer, and the house closed and it was not on the closing statement. Buyer came back, our buyer, unfortunately, came back like a week later and said, well, where's my $5,000? And the seller was no longer obligated to give it. So I just want to be clear.
So what happened in that case scenario? Just out of curiosity.
Well, who do you think paid the $5,000?
The agent?
You bet. All day long. I mean, it was in the contract, it was there, I don't know what happened. So the two agents, there was a seller agent also, so we split it. Between, it wasn't both our agents, but that's, we came to that deal, so we split it between the two agents. But the buyer, it was really the buyer's agent's fault. It was our fault, in my opinion. Now, I fought for our person, because that's what I have to do, right? So I said, I'm gonna go try to get this other side to split it with us, but the truth is, this is your lunch to eat. You did it.
This isn't like before you close the pre-closure, you need to be looking at that with your buyer to make sure that all the credits are there.
Absolutely.
And they just maybe overlooked it. I mean, it's pretty.
I don't
small.
think they looked at it at all.
Or-
No, I think you should know which contracts does it matter.
Yeah.
So some contracts, there's nothing there. Some contracts have the refrigerator needs to be included, was to be included, and $4,000 or something. You know, you just need to know, contract terminates. So you can't go back and get the fridge.
Yeah.
They don't owe you the fridge anymore. Fridge is gone. Once you sign, you accept the house as is. So have the seller pay in advance and be comfortable. Get a closing credit. So if there are repairs left to be done, it would not be unusual to be estimate times and a half as a closing credit on the closing statement. Reduce the price. All this requires lender approval also, right? So very hard to get it done last minute because the lender has to approve any of this. Escrow is a wonderful tool, right? Put times and a half the money in escrow. Say it'll be paid only to dishwasher guy, and whatever isn't needed by dishwasher guy goes back to the seller. Or terminate. I mean, your buyer wants there to be other choices. I can just tell you, well, they said they would do it. Well, you know, I don't know. Do you want to buy it? Do you want us to try one of these? Or do you not want to buy it? I mean, people hate it when you say, I mean, what, do you think I'm gonna go over there like with a gun and make them do it? I mean, what do you think is gonna happen right now? Court, that's why we have court. I mean, the only way to make, and that would mean you don't buy it. And then you sue them for being in default. That's the tool that we have. Well, my stuff's gonna be in a moving truck. Well, there are bad people. And these are your choices, right, of what to do. Okay. Ready?
Going to mess with me. Oh, there we go.
All right.
Did I jump one or is this next?
I think this, I don't know it that well by heart.
I think this is- I'm hoping it's next because it's not.
Let's
going
just
back.
roll with it. I'm in my just roll.
Oh.
Well, that was exciting. So we'll talk about an amendment for a few minutes while we
This might
wait for
take
that to
me a
be-
minute. The
That's
whole
okay.
thing closed.
The whole thing closed, but that's okay. So amendments. So let's just talk about amendments for a minute. Addendums add information to the contract. They add information. They don't change anything that's already in there. They just add something additional. This is called an amendment to the contract because it's actually changing the contractual agreement. The contractual agreement probably says as is, and that is no longer what we mean. We don't mean as is anymore. So it's called an amendment because it is changing the terms of the contract. And so it's changing the price, it's changing the closing date, it's changing the option period, it's changing some part of the contract. What we're talking about today is the condition of the home. It's changing that from what was in the contract. So an addendum is when you're going to add something to it, like a non-realty items addendum. They're going to leave the fridge. That's an addendum, not an amendment. Okay, so we're going to use and do you have this presentation?
I do.
Oh, good.
It's just gonna take me just another minute. I'm almost there. Nope. Oh my gosh. Let's try it here.
So funny. Okay, so an amendment, when you're asking for repairs, and so I'm running all over the presentation because I don't know what it was. So I'm just talking now. So my favorite phrase, and still today my favorite phrase, is functioning as intended. So I say that to my sellers and I say that to my buyers. So it is a reasonable expectation for the home to be functioning as intended. Does the oven heat to the temperature it's supposed to? If not, then that's not functioning as intended. Is there some new dishwasher backflowy thingamabloopy that needs to be added? Well, that's an upgrade. That's bringing it to building code. So the question is, you know, in my opinion, this seller is selling a used home and everything should be functioning as intended. If they need everything all new, maybe the seller will agree, but then they need to go look at new. I mean, that's kind of, you can always ask, but get your seller and your buyer. So when I talk to sellers, that's what I say is, you better honeydew everything you can find, because later we're going to do it by a licensed person. Right, so that screwing in a new sprinkler head, that's a sprinkler licensed guy later. So get the home functioning as intended. And then when I work with buyers, I say, now part of buying an existing property is we're not getting every upgrade, right? We're not getting them. We're getting only the most important things for safety and security. So an amendment modifies the contract. All right, we're ready, Diana. You are excellent.
There we go.
All right. So decide what's most important, not a wish list. It cracks me up, and y'all will know there are some agents out there who just send you things with a circle around them. Oh, really? We're just gonna repair everything? No, 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 and no. No, 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 and no. So what's most important to you as a buyer? And so as a seller, I tell my seller, tell them to take a hike. Choose your battles. So what's worth fighting over, right? The important systems, electrical, plumbing, HVAC. I mean, what are you willing to fight for? And are they willing to walk away? Because if they're not willing to walk away, if it's not fixed, I don't really know why we're asking for it. I mean, it's not going to be a new home. So hopefully you set that. And then what will the result actually be? So here's the truth, like about wood rot, right? On an FHA home, you have to get that done. And that home, the wood rot around the windows, so you repair the wood rot. You even use the same exact color paint. What does it look like when you're done?
A sore thumb.
A sore thumb. It looks horrible. Because the rest of the house is aged. And now we have, whoa, this is awesome new repaired wood rot. And you drive by the house and you go, oh God, we should have repainted. Okay, what about repairing the little holes in the wall? Oh, yeah, it's polka dot. Absolutely no doubt about it. It's polka dot.
The whole wall.
So what are you asking for? I mean, that it cracks me up to go back and read some of the amendments because, well, honey, you got, I don't want to be rude, but you got exactly what you asked for. And not one smidgen more. You just got exactly what you asked for. So be careful what you ask for, how you ask for it. What's the result going to be? Personally, I'd rather get a price reduction, a credit at closing all day long. I don't want the seller to do anything. Because I know what seller attitude always is.
Get it done.
Hurry up, get it done.
At the cheapest price possible.
At the cheapest price. And I mean, good sellers, wonderful people. What kind of attitude are you gonna have when you're moving? That's their attitude. Of course we all are. But, so be careful. Is a failed window seal cosmetic or structural? Do your people really want it, really need it? Functioning as intended or fully functional are two different things. As a professional, always be aware, and I tell buyers this all day long, sellers can sell to an iBuyer all day long. They can sell to Open Door, they can sell to an investor and not do one thing. So if you're coming on in there with your list and circling everything on the inspection, that seller has a very high likelihood of going, no, and I'm totally out of the contract. And you as a listing agent, if you haven't set the right expectations, you could lose the whole listing. Because they have a choice now. Every single homeowner has a choice. They can sell to somebody with no repairs. So be aware. And then reduce price. If you do reduce the price, don't write in lieu of repairs. Just leave that sentence off. Just do the amendment and reduce the price. Because lenders then you're opening the door for the buyer to potentially get out of the contract because you've indicated there's that much worth of repair work that needs to be done. You understand that? Awesome. And then be specific. We're involved in a lawsuit right now over have the sprinkler system checked. So the seller did that. Had someone come check, have a long list of things that need to be done to the sprinkler, and they're not doing them. Because we said have it checked. That's what we said. We said have it checked. And the seller got it checked.
Here's your $100 report.
I mean, people aren't always, people aren't always great. So you have to, in this case, it was a broken pipe under a sidewalk. It was going to be a very involved repair because it involved the town, because the sidewalk is actually in the easement. I mean, it was a thing, and seller just said, no, I'm not doing that. I didn't say I'd do that. I said I'd have it checked.
It's not wrong.
So it's not good for us. Not good at all, but that's okay. And then the two strongest words you can use in a repair amendment are repair and replace. Don't say you're going to look at it or check it or examine it or valid. No. Are we going to repair it to fully functioning, or are we going to replace it? And specifically, what is it? Okay, we're ready. This form is just the most important. It's the best form. It is so your friend, and it helps you do things in the right way. So it says, did you choose to have an inspection? Yes or no? And of course, they chose their own inspector from a list you provided, right? After completion of repairs, did they have it re-inspected? Yes or no? Because they certainly may make that choice. So did they have it re-inspected? Yes or no? Is there a home warranty? Yes or no? They could have asked for one. And if the seller said, no, I won't give you one, then the buyer doesn't have to buy that house. So if the buyer's continuing on to buy the home, they chose an inspection or not. They chose a re-inspection or not. They chose a home warranty or not, right? We don't think that way. We think, oh, well, they had to. No. Oh, they could have just gone to buy a different home. Before closing walkthrough, buyer has walked through and reviewed the property, or they haven't walked through and they're still going to buy it because I, your agent, was happily standing at the door of the home to let you in prior to closing. And I did a FaceTime walkthrough. That's still not a walkthrough. It's not a walkthrough unless they themselves took their little honey in there. Then you're checking. They chose not to visit. Okay, they chose not to visit and review the property in person. So they're buying it and they just didn't have time. Okay, well then when you go in there and it's dirty or there's been a flood behind the refrigerator, don't call me.
Or they're military and haven't moved to the area just yet.
Right. And then buyer accepts the property in its present condition is a really important sentence. Really important sentence. So if they've got repair receipts, they need to be calling, not you. They need to be calling whoever did the repair and discussing. And then buyer called to verify the receipt. So here's what's going to happen. So you need to set the right buyer expectations. They're going to call the air conditioning man or dishwashing man, lady, and say, did you do this? And they're going to say, oh yeah, you really need, if you're buying this house, I told them they really need to repipe this and redo this, but they didn't want to do any of that. Because 100% of the time, repair people recommend other activities, right? So is your buyer going to be shocked? Because I sit through lots of meetings. Well, they knew that should have happened. Well, I mean, have you ever had anything repaired and they went, you're perfect, we're done. You don't need not one more thing. Of course not. They always say, well, pretty soon you're going to need this or going to want this or whatever. So your buyer needs that information. They need to call on the receipt. And then they need to either buy it or not, which is their choice. They don't believe that. Well, seller should have done that. No. Seller should do exactly what is on the amendment and not anything further. Unless it means it's not functioning. Right? All right. And then the deadline for repair completion and receipts received. So if I were writing an offer, I'd always have a deadline that I need the receipts for repairs 3 days before closing or something like that. I don't really want to wait until the day of and then put my buyer in a situation where they truly just go to closing and don't have any idea what kind of repair was done, whatever. So, okay. All right. And then I just wanted to take a minute and stop and talk about a buyer system. If we go to mediation, if we get in a serious situation, what can you say you do for your buyer every single time, no matter what? Right? What are you doing? What is your buyer system? So do you always give 3 inspectors and they choose one? Do you always give 3 lenders and they choose one? Do you always, what do you always do? Maybe even have a checklist of what's your buyer service. I always set them up on an MLS search. I always do this. What are the things you always do? And then, do you recommend additional inspections? Do you at least offer to them? Right? Do you want to have another HVAC guy? Now they say they fixed it. Do you want to have somebody run back by there and take a look at it on your behalf and make sure it's really running? Because I'm not a condition expert. Like are you at least offering some sort of follow-up? And then save all your communications. We really, in this office in particular, you guys love to chat on the phone as opposed to following up in text or email, right? So then you can't prove what you said. And if it becomes tense between you, they're not going to remember all the great advice you give them. They're going to say that you were awful and neglectful. And if you don't have anything in writing, they look correct. Even if you've talked to them every day and can produce a list of, I called them on this day, this day, this day, this day, they're going to say, well, she just called to tell me her dog was sick or whatever. It's funny, but it's really good. Save your checklist. So if you do have a buyer checklist and a seller checklist, you want to save that. And are you reviewing the survey with them? Do you at least slow down and make sure they know what is an easement? What is a fence line? What's on the survey? Look, there's a shed with no foundation. So you could take that down. It's not on concrete. Or there's a shed with foundation. Were you aware that that was a permanent fixture? Right? So what services are you providing to your buyer? And you really need to get good at this right now because we're starting to have to fight for our commission a little bit. So we need to be sure we're worth it, right? Okay, got it. All right, so this is FHA Appraisal Thoughts, and this may be a slide that you guys want a copy of. So the reason during seller market craziness, right? Sellers could just do no wrong and ask any price. FHA buyers were very hard to get approved. And I sat through a lot of discussions about why do people not like FHA buyers or VA buyers?
Because we don't have extra money.
Well, yes, it costs a little, but the real reason is condition.
Yeah,
You have very strict condition guidelines. I mean,
Yeah.
there was no seller that should have taken. I mean, I'm sorry, but it made no sense for them to take an FHA or VA loan because they have condition requirements. These are FHA appraisal requirements. This has to be done, right? Peeling paint. If there's peeling paint, they won't approve the property. They must at least put their head and shoulders in the attic. They're required to. So they're going to know all about your stairs and your lights and what condition it's in. No missing handrails, exposed wiring, malfunctioning heating, bedrooms without windows, broken fencing, none of that. They won't approve any of that. Structural defects, like if the exterior door sticks. So we had one of these, the door stuck and and there were kids in the house and they said, no, the kids can't get out. So FHA would not approve the loan. I mean, it's a thing. Pressure release valves on the water heater. I mean, all kinds of things. High tension power lines, high powered gas lines too close. Windows must go up and down with ease because that's ingress and egress, right? It's safety. Appliances, roofs must have 2 more years of useful life left or they'll decline the loan. Large cracks, trip hazards on the front sidewalk, won't approve the loan. I mean, never wonder why FHA or VA are not popular with sellers. I mean, they're just not going to be. And I mean, I'm American, my son's in the Navy, like I'm all patriotic and all that, but I don't want to sell my home to a VA client. I mean, I'm sorry, but I don't want to unless I just have to. Because it's going to be quite a little condition discussion. And they can't, the sweet little buyer, who's the actual veteran, can't say no. It's not them. They can't say, I don't care about that. You don't have that right, and get a VA. So just good to know the level of detail that is required. Yes,
Are the requirements going to be the same for VA as they are for FHA?
pretty much exactly. Yep. So FHA and VA, I love to talk about this. So their entire purpose, the whole reason they were created is to protect the buyer, right? To protect our veterans and our less advantaged people, which is, I'm sorry, but that's just who FHA is for, less advantaged people. So the government put into place government insurance that would help protect them and help them get into a home. Because getting into a home puts you on a wealth track, so they want that. I love that. But they are all about protecting the buyer, so they're going to. They're going to protect that buyer.
We had one that we had to rush and find somebody to go out and install a trim above a window. It was like the day before closing. This was years ago, but it was the day before closing, and the buyer was a new person at the Dallas Cowboys, and they were going to training camp the following day, so we couldn't postpone. It was a massive thing for a piece of trim to be painted. Was it?
And then it even looks bad. So it doesn't match.
And the buyer's
other is
going-
weathered.
Yeah, the buyer's going, I don't care if it matches, just get it up so that and then we got to get the appraiser out there to say, yeah, it's there. Oh, was it?
This is really truly, I was not popular during seller times, sellers make all the costs. Look, sellers are correct in not accepting FHA and VA right now. They don't have to. I'm sorry, but they don't have to. And there are going to be condition expectations that are not a part of conventional. It's the whole purpose of the program. No, go ahead.
The 90-day rule. With
The flip rule?
Yeah, the flip rule. Can
Uh-huh.
you explain that a little bit? I have difficulty sometimes explaining that to FHA buyers because they.
So they're protecting the buyer. Okay, so put yourself right. So perfect segue. FHA is only about protecting the buyer. And the belief is that a flip home, somebody's making profit and the buyer is getting screwed. That's the assumption is, oh, somebody bought this for way less and all they've done is put paint and carpet and now they're charging a whole lot more. So our FHA buyer should not be buying that flip home that quickly. If they've done more repairs than that, if it's taken longer, if they've had it for a year or two, then the price difference would be okay. But 90-day flip, no, that's not fair to the buyer, is the presumption.
The question that I have is, let's say that the seller is willing to take an FHA loan.
Yeah.
But there are repairs needed.
Yeah.
And they say, well, I don't want to do repairs. I lower the price.
No,
But
not a
is-
choice.
Not a choice. But if the seller says, okay, I'm not gonna do the repairs, but I give like a credit to hold an escrow for the repairs
No.
after closing.
FHA requires the repairs completed and verified by an appraisal prior to closing.
So that would change it to the 2 or 3K loan, right? Whenever they
Yes.
hold the money
Yes.
in escrow for the
Yes.
repairs.
That's right.
Okay.
This is
Yeah.
only lender required repairs. If the buyer came in and was like, I don't like the kitchen color, they said, that's completely different
Right.
situation.
That's a different negotiation, right? Lender required repairs. But I mean, this is they're all lender required, really. They're all lender required. It's a long list.
So, I remember, I don't see it up there, but like missing carpet, if the concrete is showing and it's not stained, right? Or will they not allow stained?
So I think they will allow stain. They really go for functioning as intended. It's very much an FHA. That's where I got that phrase. That's very much an FHA VA phrase.
Oh, floor coverings, it is there. isn't it?
Yeah, they want it to be functioning as intended, not to have a whole lot of carpet.
Mhm.
It's a thing. All right. So when your seller is reluctant to do repairs, right? Remember, number one, they can do it now before you list it, or do it later by a licensee. Those are their two choices. They can't do it later without buyer agreement as a honeydew. And like as a buyer, I'm not gonna want a honeydew. Okay? So licensee, you have to disclose anything you know about the house. So if there is something you know, have them update the seller's disclosure notice and there's an update form. There's a special update the seller's disclosure notice form. And then walk away from sellers who do not want to disclose. If you're having a lot of conversation about, well, should I disclose that or how am I going to disclose? Okay, so have one good, reasonable conversation and try to explain. And then if they're balking at that, I wouldn't list the house because it is a very serious issue if they're trying to hide something. And then I loved these helpful answers. If the property could be unsafe for viewing, so help them get it into condition where it's safe for people to come in and out. And then if it isn't inspection ready, remind every seller that there's likely going to be an inspection. And so that can scare buyers away. So we need to get it safe for viewing and inspection ready. Those are good phrases. Okay. 2 amendment scenarios from our association. The buyer sends an amendment of contract after the inspection. The buyer states that if the seller doesn't sign the amendment, the buyer will terminate the contract. Can the buyer do that? Well, sure, if they're still in the option period, but just in general, no, right? Whatever language you write in there, agree or I'm out. Well, you're not out unless either the lender declines it or you're in the option period. You can't just make up some new rule. And then after executing a contract, a buyer sends an amendment of contract to the seller requesting a reduction in price. The seller does not sign the amendment and claims that the proposed amendment gives the seller the right to terminate. Of course, that's not true. The buyer requesting an amendment doesn't give the seller the right to terminate. Seller can either say yes or no to the amendment, but the original contract stays exactly as it is. We right now have an agent. She's probably been at it 3 years. She's probably closed maybe 15 homes, something like that. She is so mad right now, and I think she's mad at me. And it's not out of this office, but so she sent a repair request, and she got no response during the option period. And then the seller said, no, they're not going to do any repairs. And so how would you handle that? It happens all the time. I mean, like, I'm shocked she never ran it across it before. You send a request for repairs, nobody says anything. So what are your choices?
Opt out before the end.
Opt out, terminate, or
Extend option.
stay in, or extend the option. And probably they're not going to extend the option. So she said, but they didn't even negotiate. I'm like, I know, but you let the option period expire.
But when she didn't hear anything, the day the option period expired, she should have said, we're out,
So
or we're not gonna.
Russell Rhodes, I'm just even going to use his name because what the heck? Russell Rhodes used to never respond. And so when I knew we were making an offer on a Russell Rhodes house, I had him sign a termination at the time we asked for repairs.
Yeah.
And I said, if he doesn't respond, which is what he's going to do, his seller's not going to agree to do it. Are you ready to terminate? And the buyer, no. I'm like, okay, then okay. I just want to be clear, they're not gonna do this, they're gonna say no. Well, we should, okay, I'm gonna ask, I know this guy, right? Or they'd say, well, yeah, it's the air conditioner, we're ready to terminate. I'm like, okay, it's probably gonna come to that. And so then, let's say termination, and then, oh, no, we didn't mean that. I'm like, then you can write the whole new contract, because this one is terminated. You write a new one, and we'll see if my bar, he quit messing with me after a while. He can say exactly the same thing. But I mean, that's just, it's what you gotta do. But your buyer has to be with you, or they have to just proceed on to buy. And if they're just gonna proceed on to buy, then why are we bothering? I mean, I guess we can ask. Okay? I mean, people are mean. Okay, I think that's it. Yeah, I liked this. The definition of an expert is someone who knows what not to do. I thought before we leave broker chat, so hang in there with me one more second, we should talk about taking listings from people that you don't know. And this is very specific to this office right now. If you get a lead and you don't know them, right, you probably need some sort of proof of ownership of the house, like a tax bill or a copy of the deed or something, and a driver's license and a Zoom, so that you're looking at proof of ownership and a picture of the person, and you know that that is the person you're talking to. We have two in 1 week fake sellers out of Keller Williams Denton. I mean, Diana said, right, I mean, like, I know sometimes I sound like I'm making up stories because they're so fantastic, but no, 2 fake sellers in 1 week.
Are the tax records where it says their name on the property, is that not enough?
Yeah.
Well, only
How
if
do
you
you
then
know?
have identification and you match the ID to a face.
Identity theft is on the rise, and they figured out they can sell properties they don't own using identity theft.
So now, whenever they sign the contract, we need to request the ID.
The listing agreement,
I mean, yeah, the
yes,
listing.
you need to verify that they are who they say they are and that they are the owner of that property. So kind of the 3 things, the tax rolls, a picture ID, and then you see them on a Zoom and you go, oh,
Or in person.
that looks like the same person.
Yeah.
Because what ends up happening is a lot of times is it's somebody who doesn't look anything like the driver's license. They say, oh, no, I don't have time to Zoom today. I'm traveling. Okay, here we go.
Wow.
So you're not who you say you are. Because literally a Zoom would take 5 minutes. But twice in this office, 2 different agents, good agents, everybody good people, and completely schnookered. Schnookered, listed property with someone who doesn't own it.
Oh, my.
So at the end of this broker chat, I'm just telling you, please be careful for all those of you who are watching.
Were they
Please.
occupied?
Hmm?
Were the houses occupied?
So both of one's a lot.
I don't know the other.
I don't know about the other one. But I mean, I'm gonna assume no, right? It's got a tenant in it or something. It's not the owner. It's just unreal to me that it happened twice in a 1 week period.
Yeah.
Like I've never had it happen in all my years and never had it happen and then twice in 1 week, which tells me it's a thing, right?
It's a thing. Yeah.
Mm.
And what's worse is I worry, and both situations have resolved, like we're fine, but I worry if its sale did happen and we went and we said, well, did you check your ID? No. Did you ever see them? No. Did you ever? No. No. I mean, then we just sound ridiculous.
Wouldn't that fall on title as well, though? Because aren't they supposed to be checking IDs and stuff?
Yeah. Yes, but I also think we would look,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
then we're like, oh, no, they just were really nice.
Do
on
power
the
of
phone."
attorney, I mean, break big power of attorney or something, I'm sure.
I mean, even
The
a mail
one-
out,
they
they're
just wanna-
supposed to.
The one lot, the guy somehow found out, and he has a brother who lives here, and the brother went to the title company to say, no, who is this other person?
He found it on the silver.
I mean,
I got it.
That one I do know.
all right, that's it. Thanks, you guys. Kay, do you have any questions? Either Kay? Y'all good?
Hey, Spence, you are on mute. She's so cute.
Okay, I'm good. Thank you.
All right, thank you guys so much.